I read Fingerprints of the Gods, and there was this theory of the lost civilization.
Fingerprints of the Gods explores the possibility that there may have been a huge, forgotten episode in human history. A lost civilization, an advanced civilization that existed at the time that we think of as the Stone Age, when our ancestors are supposed to have been primitive and at a very basic level of cultural development. Fingerprints explores the possibility that there was a high civilization on Earth at that time as well.
Because we always felt to only make a movie, about, these animals and hunters, it's somewhat unexciting. So we always were looking for an idea, how could we something combine? And we could have a high culture next to the lowest or a hunter culture. And then the in-between culture of the farmers. So we had actually the 3 stages of civilization in one movie. And that was really, really exciting for us.
I know that Roland's read my books, and I hope that my work has had some part in influencing the way that he thinks about the past. What drew me to write Fingerprints of the Gods was a series of unexplained mysteries. One of them concerns the survival of maps from the Middle Ages, which show the Earth not as it looked in the Middle Ages, but that as it looked during the last ice age, more than 12,000 years ago. With modern science, we can have a very good idea of how the world looked during the last ice age. And it's really quite staggering to see those very different contours appearing on maps, the origins of which are lost in prehistory. To map the whole world at any time is a hugely complicated task. It can only be done by a reasonably advanced civilization, which has shipping, which has instruments, which is capable of exploring the world in the first place. That's a mystery enough in itself, that maps of the world have come down to us from a time when nobody is supposed to have been able to do that. But then when we find that those maps are stunningly accurate, and that they show us the world as it looked thousands and thousands of years ago, we really have to ask ourselves, where did this come from? Could there have been some civilization in the past that our historians haven't quite got their finger on yet, which passed down these maps to us as a kind of legacy? If you look at the world at that time, 12,000 years ago, say, you'll find that gigantic ice caps sat on top of much of North America and much of Northern Europe. People living on the mainland at that time were indeed at a very simple and primitive state of development. They did hunt mammoths, and they did so with extremely primitive and basic tools. The hunter-gatherer phase of human culture seems to be a phase that every culture goes through. It was the predominant way of life on our planet for tens of thousands of years. But the suggestion of 10,000 BC, which coincides exactly with my own views, is that coexisting with those more primitive types of cultures were other humans who had created an advanced civilization. Let's consider the Great Pyramid of Egypt. It weighs 6 million tons. It's got a footprint of more than 13 acres. It's 480 feet high. It's aligned to true north, south, east, and west within a tiny, tiny fraction of a single degree. It's been likened to opticians' work on a scale of acres. This requires observational and specifically astronomical skills, because you can't get that kind of precision without high-precision astronomy. These are amongst the oldest gigantic buildings that have survived anywhere in the world. Now, according to Orthodox Egyptology, they're supposed to have been built around 2500 BC, 4,500 years ago. But when you go back to that period, you find there's no background for the pyramids. They just suddenly appear. You would expect to see hundreds, maybe even thousands of years of building up of skills and techniques to move those gigantic blocks of stone. That's not something that you learn how to do overnight. That takes an enormous buildup of skills, and we do not see in the archaeological record any evidence for that buildup of skills. These structures just appear out of nowhere, fully formed. To my mind, the Giza Plateau, the three great pyramids and the Sphinx that stand there, are the most majestic, the most magnificent, and by far the most mysterious archaeological site to exist anywhere in the world. And despite 100 years of archaeology at that site, barely 2% of it has been explored. I think we've only scratched the surface of what is going to be found there. I think the whole hidden story of our past remains to be discovered, and the opportunity to recover from our state of amnesia and find out where we really came from and who we really are. One question that you begin to ask yourself is, could we be the next lost civilization? And I think when you look at our arrogance, our technological pride, the cruelty and viciousness of modern civilization, its utter disrespect for the traditions of the past, we do look in mythological terms like the next lost civilization. That's what the pyramids say to me, that a civilization can rise to an incredible level of advancement and fall and be forgotten, leaving almost no traces of itself, except gigantic monuments that seem to rise out of the mists of the past with no context and no background, just mystery, pure and simple.
You know, I mean, my last movie was about global warming, and everybody kind of thought I went crazy. And I was not so crazy after all.
I'm hoping that what 10,000 BC will do will become a modern myth-making force to make us think again about what we are and where we came from and where we're going, to make us look back at the origins of civilization and realize that these origins are extremely mysterious and veiled by the night of time, and that we need to go through that veil and rediscover ourselves if we're to move forward confidently to the future.